Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Round Robin. With me today is Christina Mulligan, Nina Mulligan, Regina Lindsay, my husband Todd Preston, and our newest member in the nest, Angela Sinclair.
Hey, everybody. Hi, y'all.
Hello.
Yo.
What's up?
That's exactly it. All right, so today we're going to be talking about Season 2, Episode 1, and that was Dennis DePue. So if you guys have listened to the episode, you know that Dennis ends up, he was quite controlling. I don't remember reading anything about him being physically abusive to his wife, but clearly there was some mental abuse there and some controlling issues. And then, of course, he ended up beating his wife in front of his children, taking his wife out of the home, and then brutally shooting her in the head. We are going to be talking today about domestic violence, what that is. We're going to define it, the different types of domestic violence, and then we're going to wrap that back into Dennis DePue. So here we go. Today I have an article from justice.gov, Office of Violence Against Women, through the U.S. Department of Justice. What is domestic violence? Domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. Domestic violence can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, psychological, or technological actions or threats of actions of other patterns of coercive behavior that influence another person within an intimate partner relationship. This includes behaviors that intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, frighten, terrorize, coerce, threaten, blame, hurt, injure, or wound someone. So we're going to start off with some examples of abusive behavior. Those are physical. So that is the typical hitting, slapping, shoving, grabbing, pinching, biting, hair pulling. Those are all types of physical abuse. And this type of abuse also includes denying a partner medical care or forcing alcohol and or drug use upon him or her. Sexual abuse is coercing or attempting to coerce any sexual contact or behavior without consent. Sexual abuse includes, but is certainly not limited to, marital rape, attacks on sexual parts of the body, forcing sex after physical violence has occurred, or treating one in a sexually demeaning manner. We have emotional abuse, which is constantly undermining an individual's sense of self-worth or self-esteem. And this may include, but is not limited to, constant criticism, diminishing one's abilities, name-calling, or damaging one's relationship with her or his children. Very common, right? Especially in the divorce situation.
Yeah.
Economic abuse, controlling or restraining a person's ability to acquire, use, or maintain economic resources to which they are entitled. And this includes using coercion, fraud, manipulation to restrict a person's access to money, assets, credit, or financial information. Unfairly using a person's personal economic resources, including money, assets, and credit, or exerting undue influence over a person's financial and economic behavior or decisions. Psychological abuse. Elements of psychological abuse include, but are not limited to, causing fear by intimidation, threatening physical harm to self, partner, children, or partner's family or friends, destruction of pets and property, and forcing isolation from family, friends, or school or work. Lastly is technological abuse. This one's new. I don't think I've heard this, but it makes sense. An act or pattern of behavior that is intended to harm, threaten, control, stalk, harass, impersonate, exploit, extort, or monitor another person that occurs using any form of technology, including but not limited to internet-enabled devices, online spaces and platforms, computers, mobile devices, cameras and imaging program apps, location tracking devices, or communication technologies, or any other emerging technology. All that makes sense.
Yeah, so actually I know somebody who, talking about the technological abuse, has divorced or had divorced a spouse who was physically abusive with her. I don't remember why exactly. She started feeling like she was under surveillance of some kind, based on, things that would transpire when she had her child, etc. And they make devices now, I guess, that you can sweep for like GPS trackers, cameras, listening devices. And she actually found a GPS locator in her child's backpack when the child came home from their dad's.
Wow.
So, I don't know how long that's really been a thing, but I do know that it's, nowadays GPS trackers and things like that are so small, and a lot of them are magnetic that you could just very easily walk up to someone's vehicle and, put one under the wheel well, and then all of a sudden where they are at all times.
Well, that's
really
frightening.
Creepy.
That's totally frightening.
Yeah, very scary.
That'd be boring if somebody was tracking me because it's either home or work.
Right. I'd be the only one tracking you, hon.
You would be tracking me?
Well, who else would be tracking you?
I don't know.
I hate to
Russians.
break it to you, but if you have to track him,
It's a problem.
there's something wrong to begin with.
Right. Right. I mean, has anything like that ever happened to any of you guys?
Yeah, my ex actually tracked me and bugged my car because we were having problems and they knew I was doing something I shouldn't be doing. And that's how he busted me.
He was like, you know what? You are acting weird. I'm gonna figure that out.
It's just that I wasn't telling him exactly where I was going. So he wanted to know more about it. Granted, this is years ago, before you had the handy-dandy trackers like what are they, the iPad things? iTag, like Regina was saying. It's super easy to do it. And people are doing it to strangers, which is when it gets really uber creepy. But yeah, I've been bugged and followed before electronically. And I didn't like it, but I totally got it. But that was like 20 years ago. It was in a different part of life.
Right.
But yeah, it does suck. But at the same time, tracking people like children is not a bad idea. So when you said that the ex had put a tracker in their kid's backpack, maybe it was just about tracking the kid, which I kind of don't think I'm against. Moms do it with their kids with cell phones nowadays.
In that instance, it would be one thing to track my children because I had the Life 360 app and I tracked my kids where they were. When I split up with my ex-husband, when I started dating again, my girlfriends were like, no, girl, you better share your location with us and let us, so that if you go missing, we know where you were last and all of that. And I totally get it. But when you're tracking your child, generally the other parent is aware.
Yeah.
That's where it falls apart for me.
Yeah, agreed. Angela, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something? Did I hear you say something?
I was just going to say that, Amazon makes it really easy to access stuff like that. And it just puts it out there so it can be misused.
So Amazon is selling tracking devices.
Oh, I'm sure. You can buy anything on Amazon. I'm going to look right now.
Okay.
Yeah, like what I said, they sell AirTags on Amazon. I'm sure they sell many other knockoffs of AirTags. And they're literally the size of $50.
Really? I don't even know what an AirTag is.
What?
For real.
I have them on my dog's
that's
collar and on my cat's collar, and they are about the diameter of a quarter and kind of look like a little button, and it gives a GPS location. You can also get it to play a tone. For example, if I want to make sure that, my cat's not hiding in my closet like he does frequently when I get ready to go to work, it's, it'll show you in real time where they are. You can play tones. And if for some reason it loses contact, because in order for it to work, it doesn't have to be in proximity to your phone. It just has to be in proximity to somebody who has an iPhone or has Bluetooth. So
which is like everywhere.
You can see, And if it powers down for some reason, it still shows you the last known location of whatever that AirTag was attached to. So it's like Find My iPhone, only just a little small piece of equipment, and takes like a button battery that you change.
I need to put that on Emily's something or other.
That's what I'm saying. She's not really good about checking in with us.
See, listen, I know where you are.
You know what? I know you're at the ice cream place.
Where I told you not to go. Right. I'm digging the AirTag.
So you have a tracker on her already.
The thing about that is, though, that even with the Life 360 app, if they turn off their location services, you can't see them. But with an AirTag, you can.
Right. So I got to get a little sneaky.
No, you just go on her phone and share her phone's location with you, and parental control that crap so she can't change it.
You can buy one of those for $23.99 on Amazon. Just saying.
Cha-ching! Put that in the basket.
Everything that I've ever done, I was already doing by 12. Okay? Don't be naive.
Check. See, I was a good little girl at 12. You were bad like my sister was bad.
I was pretty bad, too. I was sneaking out. I told you about the cellar door and all that.
Yeah. You were bad.
Okay, so I love how you always give the information about, like, essentially the topics we're talking about. And this situation was domestic violence. But that's because he ultimately killed his wife. But am I remembering wrong? He wasn't really abusive beforehand, was he?
He was very controlling. Very controlling.
Yes, but he never abused her beforehand that we know of, at least.
Not that I saw. I didn't see anything about physical abuse. It was all about emotional control. Right, so one of the things that was in the show is that he was very controlling. So really where the controlling behavior came in after they started having kids. He started withdrawing a little bit more, starting to really control. He didn't want her making any decisions. He wanted to be in control of all of it, and who knows? Maybe there could have also been some economic abuse in there as well. You know, she was a highly educated woman, and she was like, after 18 years, she's like, I can't take it. So it goes from one form of abuse to full throttle into, well, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, but we really didn't talk about the fact that maybe his control issue was really just that he wanted his wife to focus on him and only him. And then after the divorce, he kind of forced her hand to still pay attention to him because he worked on the property, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then he snapped. What was it that finally made him snap again?
It was Easter Sunday. It was his Easter. And he was being so weird that the kids were even starting to not want to be around him. And when they were like, oh, maybe can you come back later? That's when he just tweaked out, because then Marilyn could hear, him fussing at the kids because they don't want to go yet. And she's like, you know what? They're old enough to make their own decisions. And that's when he just went, ding. He went nuts, and that's when he attacked her.
Yeah, he had a definite need to be listened to, for sure.
And it is hard when you're in a relationship and you have kids because, the husband's not the main focus. The kids are the main focus. And that's where, so many people have so many issues after they have kids because it's hard. It's a shift. And maybe he was like, whoa, I'm not your moon and your sun, and our kids are, because that's the other thing that I was thinking about today. He didn't really seem to care too much about the kids because he was like, it's Marilyn or nothing. And he hauled ass. He beat her up, took her out of the house. Oh, I'm taking your mom to the hospital. Everything's going to be just fine. He knew it wasn't going to be fine. He knew what he was going to do. He had the gun already. He had everything he needed. He'd been talking about it for who knows how long, weeks, months. I don't know the time frame, but
talking to his coworker.
Right. Yeah. Talked to his coworker, took the mother, shot her, killed her, and just left. Like there was never a consideration about the kids.
Yeah, this was just his deep-seated need to be her everything. And the fact that he wasn't after the divorce, he just kind of spiraled out of control. And then maybe it was just perfect coincidental circumstances when he wasn't being listened to, she wasn't pandering to him in any way, and he just lost it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that controlling behavior, first of all, let's be clear, controlling behavior is abuse from the very beginning. That's why I worry a lot about, I've had friends that have been in very controlling relationships, and, that tends to escalate and eventually becomes physical abuse a lot of the time. And in particular, when there is a divorce, the fact that he's showing up at her house inside the house when he knows he's not supposed to be there. It's intentional to scare her, to make her feel uneasy, to let her know that she's not getting rid of him that easily. So all of that, and then a lot of times just a little bit of personal experience, not myself necessarily, but from family members in situations that I've observed. It's a person who's controlling. When you take them out of that position where they're controlling the situation, that behavior escalates initially, especially if they think that they can intimidate you into coming back or doing whatever it is that they want you to do. But then oftentimes too, the controlling behavior then gets pushed onto the children, because if he can't control her, he knows that the best way to get to her is through them. And so that's why the kids were getting to the point where they're like, okay, dad's acting weird. We don't really want to go around him. Once he realizes that he can no longer control his children, he can't control his ex-wife, then he absolutely loses it and becomes completely enraged, and this is the result of that.
Right.
I have a little bit of a story. I grew up in Charlotte. Tracy grew up there with me. It's not a huge town. We moved there in 1976, so I was 4.5, 5 years old when we first moved there. My mom was really cool. She always wanted to make friends with all the neighbors and stuff when we first moved in. And we had some neighbors that lived to the right of us, and they weren't like real close because we had like a decent amount of yard between us. But my mom made friends with the neighbors, and I'm not going to name any names, but our next door neighbor, he was a prominent judge in the city of Charlotte. My mom had befriended his wife. She'd come over, and my mom and her would have cocktails, or they'd just have snacks and would exchange recipes and stuff like that. And it wasn't very long, so I'm maybe 6, 7 years old at this time. This lady would, she had a stroke, a really bad stroke, so she was impaired verbally and physically. She was being abused by her husband, who was this prominent judge in town. And my mom would look out the kitchen window, and she'd be like, oh my God, here she comes. And all of us kids were like freaking out, because like we could see my mom was freaking out. And here she comes. She's like wobbling down the road, and she's just bawling and crying. And this lady would come in, and my mom would take her in and find out what was going on. And this man was abusing her. They did have kids, but they were like on the older side, so they were a little bit older than my older siblings. So at this time, they were already grown up and out of the house. So it's just the man and the wife living at this house. It seemed like after she had the stroke, the abuse got worse and worse and worse all the time. And we found this lady basically struggling just to get up the road to come to my mom for help. My mom couldn't do anything. This dude's like the judge in town.
Was it physical abuse?
It was physical abuse. It was mental abuse. It was everything you could think of. And my mom couldn't do anything about it because this was a guy of power in town, in a small town.
Mm-hmm.
So it got to the point where he had actually moved his mistress into the house while she was still there. And at some point she had passed away. Who knows? Was it of natural causes, or who knows? But just the haunting memories of those neighbors and what this poor lady looked like every time she came over, just sobbing and wanting help and could never get the help. What a horrible fucking thing. Anyway, so years later, I'm working in the factory in Marshall, and there's a guy that starts working there, and he looks just like my neighbor who was the judge. And it was like a long time before I could even talk to this dude and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, why can't I even approach this dude? I hate this guy, like, immediately. And then it dawned on me, it's because he looks just like the judge. Turns out he was a really cool dude, and I'm glad I got past it. But that's how crazily it stuck with me, from my childhood, because this was a span from I was 5 years old to probably 7, 8 years old. All this was going on. As a child, to see an abused lady that was living this every day, and I'm telling you, it was multiple times a week. This poor woman was coming to my mom for help, and my mom she had her hands tied.
That's a sin, but back in that day, back in that time, do you know how commonplace that was? It's sickening to think about.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very commonplace because women did not have equal rights or equal pay, which we don't really still have. But the point is that many women were stuck. They were stuck. And this was happening to them, and either their spouses were prominent in the neighborhood, or they made a lot of money, or even for the folks that didn't make a lot of money, the wife made even less. So she couldn't support herself, and she had no one to reach out to. So that's where everything that Tracy talked about at the beginning of this podcast, that's where all of that becomes uber important for women to be aware of this. They're not found needing like your neighbor was.
Exactly. Yep.
That's a heartbreaking story. But sadly, it's one of the things that I ran into. So before I moved into the corporate part of this company, you know, I was a nurse doing interventional work at the center, and a patient missed their appointment, and the guy came in and he was so distraught. And I just remember I was struck by, like, I can't even believe you're here telling me why you missed your appointment. His daughter was in a physically abusive relationship. She had a baby, and she got to the point where she finally got out of the relationship, and which is the worst, right? Because that's the worst time when a woman leaves an abusive relationship. That's when, like, all point bulletin, better be aware, everybody should know, keep an eye on, help, because he killed her. And that's why this patient missed their appointment.
Wow.
And I just remember just thinking, are you kidding me? And why are you here? You know what I mean? Like, I was just struck by, like, oh my gosh, she finally got free of him, and then the stalking and this and that, and she came out of her house or apartment or whatever it is. He stabbed her to death right there.
Wow.
Baby and all. At one point I was in a relationship. It was some emotional abuse, psychological abuse, but never physical, because I just would fucking kill you. I don't tolerate that kind of shit. You know, you might skate with a little bit of emotional or psychological abuse for a smidge there, but never the physical.
I know, but that's the thing, Trace, is there are a lot of women out there that think and feel the same as you, and then all of a sudden find themselves in a world they never imagined themselves. Because, you know, like Regina has talked about on a bunch of our podcasts, it's little by little. It's incremental.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How people get stuck in relationships like this. And at first, it's great. It's euphoric. And then all of a sudden, it's not. So
it's great until the baby comes. But we're talking about abusive relationships. It comes incrementally, and everything is fine until the baby comes. And then it becomes incrementally worse. That's when you start getting punished because you're no longer replenishing their cup all the time. You now have to tend to an infant baby who can't do anything for themselves. That's how it works. And that's how it worked in this guy's marriage too. And when he could no longer control her, he did what any narcissist does. He gets rid of it. And he absolutely doesn't care about the kids because the kids are an accessory. And he probably didn't want them anyway to begin with. But as a narcissist, you have to look good to the outside world. And you can't be a married man without the children in tow as well. So,
yeah, like the big old story, the white picket fence and all that.
yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Angela? Do you have anything you want to toss in about that?
Well, yeah, I found an article on sinbysilence.com, and it was talking about how in the 80s, it became well known that it was an issue, domestic violence. And the 90s proved to be a turning point decade with the Violence Against Women Act being passed in 1994. And it also goes on to say that on average, more than 4 women are murdered by their intimate partners in this country every single day. And that's from the Bureau of Justice Statistics Crime Data Brief. So that's like 1,460 women every single day in this country that
Holy
die
cow.
because of domestic violence. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
And it also talks about, domestic abuse creates a cycle of violence. Children who are abused or witness abuse are at a higher risk of abusing their own family and significant others as an adult, which I've known a lot of people who have been in abusive relationships and have been abused. I grew up in an abusive home, So I can attest to that, and it's up to the children of the abusers to break that cycle, really, honestly. But
Yeah.
it's sad because so many people follow that cycle. Like, my grandfather was an abusive person, therefore my father was abusive. And my brother and I were like, no. So I just found this article really interesting, and I wanted to share it.
Thank you so much, because, wow, those numbers are, wow, it kind of takes your breath away. And it does make sense.
It really does.
Yeah, and it does make sense. Right? I mean, we've talked about this in other shows, right? When we're children, what do? We just watch. It's how we're programmed initially, right? So, and then hopefully as we grow, it's like, oh, we don't want to do that. It's just an instinct. Sometimes, I mean, my dad was heavy-handed. He was a backhanding kind of a guy. It didn't always happen, but, I would push the buttons. And so I feel those things with Emily, too. Sometimes I can feel that from inside. Like, I feel like I want to do something hurtful to her. But I think it out. I'm like, no. You don't want to do those things. But then the other side of me says, yes, you do. But so I get it. I completely, all that makes sense. Thank you so much for sharing that.
The nurture of everything, you're living in the household, like you were talking about, the programming that we all go through. It's just, that's the reason why conversations like this, and then people listening to us and having conversations of their own, the key to breaking it, like Angela was talking about, it's up to the next generation to break that cycle. The key to breaking it is talking about it, is learning about it, is learning the whys, learning the hows, learning the whens, learning the what fors, so we could fix them all.
Agreed, and it's the talking that's so hard, though, don't you think?
I think it is. I think there's also sort of a flip side to this that isn't talked about a lot either. So we know that people who are hurt people, right? And, that's kind of a foregone conclusion. That whole nurture thing, the behavior was modeled for these children, so a lot of them grow up to be abusers, but there's also a very large percentage of them who grow up to have very abusive relationships of their own. And, I know some people like this that it's almost like, for lack of a better way to put it, that they don't know how to have a relationship with someone who doesn't hurt them. Because in their head as a child, that was what got equated with love.
Yeah, they've already normalized it in their brain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they end up in a relationship. So not all of them end up abusers. A lot of them end up being cyclically the victims of abuse because they don't know how to have a normal relationship or what it looks like when your partner doesn't hurt you.
Right. And having conversations like these helps the people who are questioning that normalcy, stuff that was normalized to them through the nurture of their upbringing and things that are being shown to them on a daily basis. When they hear other people talking about it, when they hear more representation of their situation, then they could start to see the light, so to speak. They could actually be like, but wait, that's not normal. I was feeling like it wasn't, but everything in my life showed me that it was, because everyone I'm surrounded with is of that type, because that's what they do. Like Regina was just saying, they don't know any better. They don't know how to be in relationships with anybody that is not abusive to them. So they're probably more likely surrounded by that everywhere they look.
Yeah, and you know what else I was just thinking about when you were talking about that too, Christine, is that, well, when you're a child and you're in an abusive home, whether it's you're being sexually abused, physically abused, whatever the abuse is, you don't realize that other homes aren't like that. And I find that very interesting. Once someone that is in a situation like that, and then they see how another family functions, it's almost like they're dumbfounded with it, like, oh, because I thought this was normal.
Exactly. That's what I mean. They don't know any better. They think it is normal. They think everyone does have something like them to some degree because they don't talk about it, because you don't talk about it, so you don't expect anybody to talk about it. But when we as a society start talking about all these evils and all of these possibilities, then they at least hear about it. And if they relate to it, then they start to get the idea that it's wrong. So conversations like this podcast, that's the biggest benefit to them as far as I see it. Representation of alternative reality. And if you hear something that resonates with you, then question it. Question it.
Okay, but can I question something?
Of
Can
course.
I?
Nina!
Christine goes,
Can I question? I just want to know. Like, did this lady not have glasses on when she met this guy? I mean, come on. He looked crazy.
Oh, my
He
gosh.
looked crazy.
Exactly.
Well, and to be quite honest, like if you look up pictures of Marilyn and Dennis, they both look a little kind of creepy.
Yeah. Like they should be in a horror movie.
They could have both been in one.
To be honest with you, I kind of thought they looked related a little bit,
But when,
it's a pretty cool town, so
right.
I'm just saying, I had to lighten the spirit a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. What else? Does anybody have anything else about these guys?
I just want to touch on my story again a little bit, because as a child and witnessing this, because my parents were very loving, had a great relationship and stuff, and to see this as a child from a neighbor, how foreign it seemed to me, and I think that's why it stuck with me so much, because I didn't really ever experience anything like this before, and how terrified I was when I saw this poor lady walking up the road every other day.
Right, so she was hobbling
Yeah.
because she had
She had
whatever
yeah.
sided weakness.
Yep, she had a stroke.
And she's
half
crying,
half her
so-
face was paralyzed. She could barely scoot one leg. I mean, it was it was long and torturous to watch, because it was at least 100 feet away. That's how far our houses were. And to see her just scooting and dragging along and crying and hobbling, and it was like, oh my God, geez, we gotta help this lady. But nobody could help her. That's the horrible thing. And my mom did everything she could.
And so this was in the 70s, right?
This is in the 70s, yeah.
So the good thing about that is that there's so much more awareness,
Yeah.
and I'm sure it's still happening. People in power.
Yeah.
Well, we won't go down that path.
I just, had a thought about, Todd talking about his mom trying to help. That's just something I also kind of want to bring up, though, because we've got people listening in. If you're witnessing abuse, if you're seeing a friend, a family member, a neighbor, yes, definitely, do what you can to help, but also be mindful about how you go about that, because sometimes well-intentioned people trying to intervene can lead to the abuse escalating if the abuser finds out about it. So
Yeah.
you do have to be delicate in the way that you ask questions, the same reason that we don't ask our patients, our little elderly patients, our female patients, about whether or not they feel safe in front of someone that we suspect may be abusing them. It's really important to consider the audience and how you go about that. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Good point. Thank you for doing that, Regina. So I do want to throw out a couple of numbers, because like we've talked about, one, if you are in a situation where you are dealing with some domestic violence, I hope you have someone you can speak to, because I think talking is the first thing that can help, right? Getting it out, because your abuser, that's a part of their job, is to keep you down, make sure you don't have any friends, pull you away from everyone who loves you, so you're totally dependent on that person. So if you have someone you can talk to and trust, please do that. Talk to a good friend. There's also some numbers that I have. One is for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and that number is 800-799-7233. So 800-799-7233. There's also a National Center for Victims of Crime, 855-484-2846. Then you also have the website, so if you just go on to domestic abuse, it'll get you there. And a couple of cool things. So one about thisjustice.gov, where I'm at right now on the Department of Justice, there is a quick exit button. So right, if you're trying to find help, you're looking for numbers, you're looking for something that you can text or something that you can call, there's a quick exit button. So as soon as you tap that, because maybe the person who is committing the violence against you in whatever form that may be, you can hit that button. And what I found when I touched it, when I clicked on it, is it opened up the world map. Like I was just kind of generally looking up some things and I got in and out of it a couple times, and that's what it kept doing. So it's a safety feature that's built into these websites, which I think is extremely cool. So if anybody is suffering any one of those forms of abuse, just know, like we've all said, it all comes on in time. Your abuser is generally going to be someone very charismatic, someone so wonderful. Your charming prince, your charming princess, because men and women both do this. I don't know, when you feel something's not right, listen to yourself, because it's not. Nobody should ever degrade you in any way, shape, or form, hold things from you, physically abuse you, sexually abuse you, whether you're married or not. Rape is rape. So.
And abuse is abuse. If you're feeling good and someone else is the cause of your sorrow, anger, or worry, reach out and talk to somebody about it.
Absolutely.
Love isn't supposed to hurt.
Love is supposed to be good.
Another thing that I was just thinking about is we like to focus on people that are in relationships and their person was lovely and wonderful at first and then you found yourself there. There's also the case where things are okay for a long time and you feel like you know the real them and the rest of the world just doesn't understand. Sometimes you need to believe what they're showing you. Maybe you don't know what you think you know. Maybe the rest of the world's onto something and you can't fix them. You can't fix them. Because some people are in abusive relationships and they hang in there because they believe that they can help, that they can fix their partner. And that's not usually the case either. That is also an abusive relationship.
All right, guys. Well, if no one else has anything to add in, I think we'll wrap it up. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you all back on Malice Monday. Have an amazing week, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Come back. Bye.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.